Welcome back to Learning Spanish with Mr. A. So, what I have here on the board is basically what happens when you have stem changing verbs in the subjunctive present. Well, you know very well what happens in the simple present tense. We talked about that before. And we agreed that in the simple present tense, you're going to change the stem on the next to the last syllable, but you will not change the stem when you get the first and the second person plural. That's a given, okay? Well, guess what? When you deal with the stem changing verbs in the subjunctive present, as long as you're dealing with AR verbs and ER verbs, you will apply the same rule that you apply in the simple present tense in the subjunctive present. That's kind of neat, okay? You gotta be careful though, because remember, you're not in the present tense here. You're not in that simple present tense deal. You are in the subjunctive present. So that said, you have to use the endings from the subjunctive present with your stem changing verbs AR and ER, okay? You understand that? All right, so I wrote down here a recap of what I just told you. So let's go through it together and let's see, if you can read what I wrote, right? So I'm gonna read it for you. All right, so the AR and the ER stem changing verbs work just like in the simple present tense, except that you must replace the endings from the present tense with the endings from the subjunctive present. It's common sense. You're in a different tense, okay? You're implying the suggestion here, the uncertainty. All right, now the IR verbs are the ones that are going to give us a bit of a hard time here, okay? All right, well, the IR stem changing verbs are going to behave differently in the subjunctive present. This is what you need to emphasize here. You see, if you take verbs like to ask for, to order, pedir, repetir, competir, okay? I could go on and on, there's a few like that, but those guys, you know what's going to happen here? If you remember, in the simple present tense, we have a stem change that goes from in to I. Yeah, well, guess what? You're going to have it here too. The difference though is that here in this particular case, in dealing with the subjunctive present, that stem change is going to show up all the way through the singular first, second, third, and through the plural first, second, third. Yes, all right? So that can be a challenge when you're writing down an essay or presenting something, but those are things that you need to get used to, all right, with practice, of course. All right, so I wrote it down here, okay? Now, what I did also is I brought in morir and dormir, right? What happens in this particular case? Dormir and morir, they are two IR verbs, just like pedir, competir, or repetir, okay? Or compartir, all right? But we don't care about compartir here because we don't have the stem change, so it doesn't come into the game here. I picked those three because they fit right in. All right, so what happens with morir and dormir is pretty odd. Up until now, you know that you have to change the stem, all right, all the way through except on nosotros and vosotros. Now you've learned that in the subjunctive present, with the IR verbs, you change the stem all the way through. If you are with verbs like pedir, competir. Now with dormir and morir, you're going to have two stem changes to deal with. All right, so basically, you're going to have the first stem change that's going to look like this, UE, right? Which is nothing new from the simple present tense because it takes the same stem change. But now when you get to the nosotros and the vosotros forms, you're going to have the U as a stem change. So what happens here, right? You change the stem all the way through, but when you get to nosotros and vosotros, you have a different stem change. Tricky. All right, so let's go through it together. Repeat to me. Muera, mueras, muera, muramos, murais, mueran. Okay? Now, let's go back to, let's say, pedir. I wrote it down here. We might as well just practice slowly. Come on. Pida, pidas, pida, pidamos, pidais, pidan. All right? It takes practice, but it's advanced high school level here. I've taught higher than that before in high school, but when I look at the curriculum that we've been teaching lately, that's way ahead of the game. But if you want to learn the language of Spanish really well, that's the most common spoken tense in Spanish. I mean, I have friends who are Hispanic, and that's in use all the time. And well, you know, it's one of those things that you've got to go through. See, I speak English as a second language, right? Well, I had to learn the irregular verbs, and I was only 11 when I learned them, and it was a struggle. Nothing comes free. You have to go get it. And when you come down to the subjunctive present in Spanish and you apply the stem changing verbs, you're on easy street as long as you have AR and ER stem changing verbs. But once you get into the IR verbs, you're gonna have to remember this. It's a challenge, but such is life, okay? So it doesn't come free. So remember verbs like repetir, okay, pedir, all right? They're gonna have the E going on into I all the way through. Let me write it down here, okay? All right, this is it. Okay, so E goes into I, all the way through, like I said up here, all right? Good. And then, of course, verbs like morir, dormir, well, dual stem change, all right? Well, I hope you understood what I just taught you, all right? And I want to thank you so very much for watching this video. And, well, I will see you in the next instructional video. Hasta luego.